Today we'll talk about what seems to become our rotation in Shadowlands. Spoiler, it plays very clunky at the moment, can have a weird downtime, and gets you about 30 stacks of Void Form. Sounds fun? Let's get into it. Hey guys, it's Angelo, and today I want to give you guys a first look at what seems very likely to become our rotation in Shadowlands. In WoW's upcoming expansion, many things are going to change. Most importantly for us, old spells will be returning to the game, which will alter our rotation quite significantly, specifically Shadow Word Death and Devouring Plague. Shadowlands seems to be giving less prominence to our Void Form, while trying to mix an old iteration of the Shadow Priest, which was very dot reliant, with a new one which wants to rely on Void Form in order to deal damage. Now keep in mind that everything you are about to see is still subject to change, so I'd like for you to take a look at the core structure of this rotation rather than the damage output. Currently in the beta, the Shadow Priest's damage output all in all seems very competitive, but that is something that could change any minute, so there's no need to focus our attention on the raw output at all. This video is meant not only to display the current playstyle, but also to highlight potential problems once the game launches. If you would like to join the discussion, then be sure to head on over to Discord, with the link of course in the description box below. Alright, with that being said, and without any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Okay, so firstly let's take a quick dive into what's changed when it comes to our rotation, or rather the basic spells within our rotation. Now if you would like to see all changes of the Shadow Priest covered, then be sure to check out the Shadow Priest first look video, which I had done a while back. The link should pop up on your screen now. In this video, I'll talk specifically about changes to our rotation only. Okay, so the changes we have to consider here are, as stated before, the implementation of Devouring Plague and Shadow Word Death. Devouring Plague costs 50 insanity and applies a 12-second dot to the target, which deals a moderate amount of damage instantly and then a very high amount of damage over the course of 12 seconds. Due to it costing 50 insanity, however, it will limit our ability to use it during Void Form, more on that in a bit. Shadow Word Death also makes its comeback, dealing solid amounts of damage, generating 15 insanity, but reflecting the same amount of damage back to you, should your target not die. The latter part is rather irrelevant most of the time, but does want you to treat Shadow Word Death with a bit of caution, or at least motivate your healer more if they know what you'll be joining their group, or that you'll rather be joining their group. From the standpoint of cooldowns, we also have some interesting changes, most importantly Power Infusion, and, depending on which talents you will be picking, Mindbender and Shadow Crash. Now talents like Dark Void or Dark Ascension will still be situational, so I don't want to be talking about those too much just yet. Power Infusion is on a 2-minute cooldown and infuses the target with 25% increased haste for 20 seconds. Power Infusion can also be cast on any ally in your group, and this of course includes yourself. Now Power Infusion is incredibly potent, and when it comes to our rotation, can certainly be considered our major cooldown. The other cooldown we could potentially be playing with is Mindbender. As many of you know, I had just covered the Mindbender build in the last video, and it's therefore very important that we consider this playstyle when looking at our rotation. Mindbender, in its Shadowlands iteration at least, so with the according legendary the Shadowflame Prism, and when playing with Fey Blessings and the Night Fey Covenant, is on a 36 seconds cooldown baseline and attacks your target for 15 seconds. It generates 6 insanity per attack, scaling with the amount of haste you have, and it replaces your Shadow Fiend. Now the true strength here is Mindbender's synergy with Fey Blessings. Fey Blessings during its uptime reduces the cooldown of Mindbender even further by 3 seconds for each cast of Void Bolt, meaning the cooldown can be even lower than 36 seconds. When using Void Bolt at every available opportunity, you will be able to lower the cooldown down to 21 seconds with current beta haste levels, meaning your Mindbender will only have an actual downtime of 6 to 7 seconds every time when Fey Blessing is ready. Keep in mind that in and of itself the Mindbender only lasts for 15 seconds as well, meaning again this downtime will be narrowed down to about 7 seconds. Now in a raid environment, Fey Blessings does not currently guarantee to trigger on you, meaning it can very well trigger on 5 other allies, even their pets, their totems, anything, but not on you at all. This means that you will never be guaranteed the amount of Mindbender uptime which you will have in a dungeon setting. In total though, this means that we currently have 2 very specific abilities which are strongest in our kit, Mindbender and Devouring Plague. Using them both to the strongest effect counters the Shadow Priest's actual playstyle with Void Form completely, and Void Form will only be used as a means to maximize the damage output of both Mindbender and Devouring Plague, rather than being the center of your playstyle. Whether or not this will still change remains to be seen, but currently, honestly, the Shadow Priest's greatest enemy is itself, because of how various internal mechanics are incongruent to one another. Okay, let's take a look at how this looks on target dummies, before taking a look at it in an actual dungeon setting. I'll be playing with Shadow Word Void, Misery, Shadow Crash, Mindbender, and Legacy of the Void. The most likely build we'll be going with in Shadowlands by the current looks of it. I will begin with my 2 Shadow Word Void charges before applying my dots into a Shadow Crash, then Shadow Word Death, and will then be able to enter Void Form. Before entering Void Form, I'll want to set up both Fey Blessings and Mindbender, so of course cast them both, to have the most optimal effect on my gameplay. I will then enter Void Form and immediately cast Void Bolt to shorten Mindbender's cooldown. It is now when I will apply my first Devouring Plague, and then continuing to apply my regular rotation, prioritizing Void Bolt, then Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death, while keeping Shadow Crash on cooldown. While in Void Form, I will only use Devouring Plague once very early on, or when it procs via my Conduit, Mind Devourer, and then again before I can't surpass the threshold of the needed 50 Insanity anymore, allowing for it to drop me out of Void Form. Once Mindbender is back up, I'll use it again, and will keep prioritizing Void Bolt in order to reduce its cooldown. If I do this correctly, not only will I be able to cast at least 2 Devouring Plagues during my Void Forms, but I will also be back in Void Form rather quickly, and can keep it up for a bit longer with Mindbender. Keep in mind that when using Mindbender, I'm not playing with Lingering Insanity, therefore it doesn't matter what happens after my Void Form, but rather what happens within. I will want to ensure a long but healthy Void Form as good as possible, but I have no stacks I need to consider when falling out, meaning I can easily prioritize Devouring Plague. When taking a look at dungeons, this playstyle is also easily applicable. Mindbender will always be available pretty much every trash pack, and the only thing which you have to do is ramp up your Void Form quickly and then focus on your Devouring Plagues. After playing this playstyle for about a week now, it's safe to say this currently gives us the highest damage output. This is a shame, because this entire playstyle directly conflicts with everything, and I mean everything, that Void Form is about. This playstyle tries very hard to prevent us from using Void Form to its actual effect of stacking it high. In Legion, we wanted to stack Void Form as high as possible because Void Form itself, and every benefit it gave us, was very strong. In Battle for Azeroth, we wanted to stack Void Form in order to get as many Cores of Insanity and Lingering Insanity stacks as possible. In Shadowlands, none of these factors even come into consideration into our playstyle, and the only real reason we currently have for our Void Form are the Void Bolts, which reduce yours and your allies' major ability cooldowns, and to grant Devouring Plague some more damage through the increased spell damage and the increased haste. The question we need to ask ourselves here is simple. Is this intended? Because at this point, that is very difficult to say. Up until now, I was a strong supporter of the developers, and as you all know, always felt like my best interests with the spec could be what was on their mind. Even after the Shadow Priest had arguably been stripped from a sheer vast amount of factors which made it fun in Legion, I remained faithful nonetheless in Battle for Azeroth. After playing the spec though ever since the alpha of Shadowlands, even before Devouring Plague made its comeback, I began feeling very worried for the spec because so many building blocks don't fit together properly. Why is Insanity both a resource which we want to prevent from draining for as long as we can, and also a resource which we want to spend in order to use Devouring Plague? Is this not entirely counterintuitive to itself? Why do I have no actual real benefit from using Void Form in and of itself? Why are there no spells or abilities in the game baseline which support extending our Void form, like Void Torrent, or the old version of Surrender to Madness, or even 2 charges of Mind Blast? Oof. There are many things wrong with the spec at the moment, and in the upcoming days and weeks we will try to cover all of them as good as possible. Our rotation clearly needs a lot of work though, and at this point it's very difficult to pinpoint where to start. It's very unclear to me which direction Blizzard feels like taking with the spec, and therefore it's impossible to really argue where we should start with the fixes. I think the best idea would be to actually decide which path the spec is supposed to take, or, if multiple builds are supposed to be viable, implementing measures to support more than one playstyle, which currently isn't really the case. Sure, it seems like we'll deal some decent damage, but at what cost? At the cost of the spec feeling unsatisfying? At the cost of having to sacrifice the playstyle we enjoyed for the past 2 expansions? It's hard to say. We'll definitely have some interesting months ahead of us. Let me know what you think. What are you expecting to see for the Shadow Priest in Shadowlands? Do you think a Devouring Plague and Mindbender centered playstyle will be enjoyable? Why or why not? I'd be excited to know what you have to say in the comments down below, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please be sure to go ahead and give it a like, and if you want to stay updated on the content of my channel, feel free to subscribe. A special thanks as always to my supporters over at Patreon, you guys help out a lot, and thank you so much everyone for watching. Now if you have gotten a beta invite, have a lot of fun, go ahead and test out as many things as you can. If not, I hope that you still enjoy retail. As always my friends, have a good one, and I will see you all in the next one.